When you said Rudyard Kipling, I thought, oh, I hope he isn't going to say that one about the female of the species is more deadly than the male. It's a very famous Kipling quote. And actually, when you were thinking about that, there was I just read it. It's a real story. It's about a minister who was sort of humor challenged. And so he went to a minister's conference, and he thought there were all these breakout sessions, and he went to the one to learn about how to be humorous in your talk. And so he took notes, and the guy who came out and spoke said, "I've spent at least half my life in the arms of a woman who wasn't my wife." And everybody started, "What? Mom." It was my mother. So, anyway, so he thought, I'm going to use that one. I like that. That's a nice, wholesome, clean joke. So he goes back to his congregation, and he stands up there, and he says, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." He said, "I spent a big chunk of my life in the arms of a woman who isn't my wife." And there was deadly still in the congregation. And he stood there kind of trembling for a really long time, and he got all flushed, and he said, "Wait, I forgot who." Poor guy. Yeah, so I don't think he tried humor anymore. So here we are, and I've done a Mother's Day theme sermon a couple times, but I like to keep changing things up here. So I don't know if you all got my email, but I talked about a lot of different things, and then I said I'm going to talk about Moses, and what does that have to do with anything? But you're going to find out. So picture it. I love Sophia on Golden Girls. Picture it. Egypt, 1300 BCE, or sort of thereabouts. Okay. That's the nature of Old Testament stories. Most scholars, by the way, question things like the Exodus, but the stories are still useful. So picture it. Life in Egypt has not been very good to you if you're a Hebrew. Along comes this very fierce, mildly crazy kind of guy. His name is Moses, and he says, "You're going to leave." Now, you don't believe him, but one thing leads to another, and then the tradition of Passover is born. And finally, Ramses the Great says, "Get the heck out of my country." Okay, it's a story. So you pack up everything and basically you start walking. How many of you could do that today? Well, you need to drive. First of all, you need a truck. And you probably need a big rental truck. So you start walking. Now, there are skeptics among you Hebrews because you're thinking, this isn't that good an idea. We had a home. We were good. You don't like change because you're human. But peer pressure is tremendous. There's your in-laws nagging you. But Ben Joseph is going, and your sister's husband is going, and we all have to go. And they're going, Moses this and Moses that, till you're sick of hearing about Moses. But you pack up your things and you say goodbye to home sweet hovel, and off you go. You set off with several thousand of your closest friends, and you have adventures along the way, which I will not go into today, but I'm sure you've all seen the movies, so you've seen some of the adventures. Eventually, you arrive at the foot of Mount Sinai and set up a big camp. And Moses, right when you kind of need his leadership, he takes off. He goes up the mountain to commune with God. And he stays up there, and he stays up there, and he stays up there. And everyone's starting to get a little worried. People are standing around whispering to each other that this was a big mistake. I can't believe we walked all the way out here, and now where's the guy? So, shouldn't have come. What were we thinking? And of course they start saying to each other, I only came because you wanted to come. So the fear spreads. It becomes anxiety, it becomes despair, and everybody's saying, well, we're stuck in the middle of the desert now with nowhere to go. So people feel things getting out of control. Now, when people feel things getting out of control, whose voices are heard first? The loudest. Not the wisest, the loudest. When there's noise and confusion, what someone shouts, even mindlessly, ridiculously, people will listen to, especially if the person talking sounds like they know what they're saying, right? They might sound wise and a little godlike when you're in a panic. Even foolish and impulsive gestures are mistaken for decisive action. We've seen that throughout history, in our politics, everywhere we see that. Let's face it, how many of you like to feel safe and secure? How many of you like hovering out on the edge of the abyss? Gee, nobody. What a surprise. Yeah, okay, we have Mr. I'll hang out on the abyss over here.
Craig was looking at it too.
And Craig is also, see the youth, the wonderful, beautiful volley of youth. They're going to hang out on the abyss. So, you gather around someone who says to you, you know what? We need an idol. We need, like those ones our Egyptian friends had, they all had them. That's what we need. That will protect us. So, they go around taking up a collection of all the gold that people have. Okay, fork it over. Come on. Now, of course, they don't mention about the technology of doing all this in the middle of the desert, but they get all the gold, they melt it down, and soon they have a god. Now, we can't really blame them, but I will say Moses certainly did. He had, let's face it, he hadn't even given them the commandment yet about the graven images. So why he got so bent out of shape, we'll never know. He was actually very unreasonable about it. So today, however, we might well ask from our vaunted perspective of modern technology and wisdom and insight, what good is a God that you have created and can control? Think about it. They made it. They could carry it around wherever they wanted. They made it. In a very real sense, most religions do that very thing without even realizing it. But for now, we'll stick to specific ironies. Despite the fact that it makes no sense to create an artificial God to go before us and then to worship them with our time, our money, our health, we do it anyway. We fool ourselves this way a lot. Think of them. Think of the gods we create. You're probably thinking, well, I don't have any golden calves at my house. Well, you probably don't. How about gods like money? How about gods like certainty? How many of you love to be certain? Ooh, it feels good, doesn't it? I'm absolutely certain. How about the God of righteousness? I am so righteous. I am so righteous. See, they offer us this very fragile reed to which we can cling when we feel like life is out of control. Okay? Which, by the way, the God of control. How many of you worship the God of control? You just love to be in charge, don't you? Yeah. So the Hebrews poured their monetary wealth into this golden calf so it could be to them an image of their strength and their greatness and their safety. With that symbol, they hoped to convince themselves that they were braver, smarter, and more successful than they actually felt they were without the golden calf. So what is it about our golden calves that makes us feel secure? What do we hope will ease our anxieties? Well, let me give you an example. I read it was an article, an essay by a minister who said, since I was a child, I was known as a hard worker. I got a lot of praise for being a hard worker, but not for anything else. So I decided that hard work was what I was all about. It would gain me recognition, appreciation, and love. I worked so hard, he said, I wrote the longest doctoral thesis in the history of my seminary. He had a perfect attendance record at every class. He said, and then I became a young minister and I filled my appointment book with people to visit and meetings and pastoral things and things to do and training because I didn't want to stop and wonder, what was I good for if I stopped working hard? I had made a fragile God called the hard worker. And I had convinced myself the world would come crashing down if the hard work deity was not at the forefront of my life and if I failed to obey it. How many of you have done hard worker is my value? A lot of you have, yes. Nowadays, we just call it a workaholic. We kind of think it's kind of cute, kind of fun. It isn't. It isn't. We treat it like a cliche without acknowledging a much, much deeper truth that it is a false religion. Okay, it is a false religion. And it also becomes an addiction. How many of you have been addicted to your work? You think the world will end if you don't do it? Yeah, I know. So some of you skeptics out there are saying, but I thought working hard was a good trait. It is, until we let it get out of proportion in the context of our lives. There are many, many good traits that can take on the status of golden calf if we let them. For example, self-image, golden calf for everybody. Okay, we can serve it slavishly. We can dismiss our need to be open to other people, other experiences, open to new events, because we have this self-image fixed in our mind and has become what we will worship, because it is us. Okay, another golden calf. I love this one. The idol of toughness. The John Wayne. What's a good female equivalent of the tough woman? Like the Boudica, the warrior in ancient England. Tough. Boy, that woman drove a chariot and slaughtered people by the thousands. So she was very tough. The idol of toughness. Those who worship this particular idol present themselves in this way. I'm tough, I can take it. I'm tough, I can take it. When the going gets tough, I get going. You can say anything you want about me, it just rolls right off. Negative feedback, no problem. People walk away from us because they can't penetrate our toughness. So what, you would say? Who needs a lot of friends anyway? I'm tough. Do you know someone like that? Have you been someone like that? Do you really believe that criticism rolls right off? I don't think so. Yes, we need to develop some toughness. We need that to survive the way people and events can sometimes try to squash us. Have you ever been squashed by a person or event? Yes, everybody should raise their hand for this one. Unless you've been in a cocoon somewhere, you have been squashed. So it seems reasonable to worship toughness as the only sure protection against the world, and we love sure, don't we? But even if our idol could protect us against everything that wounds us, everything. Okay, imagine that. You've got an armor, nothing hurts, nothing bothers you, nothing ever wounds you. All you get is a state of existence, not a life. There are some times when it is only the wounds that will grow our souls, that will make us who we really want to become. We have all grown from pain. Another god for the pantheon, I mentioned it earlier, the golden calf of certainty. Those who worship at this shrine research everything. They discuss, they consult, they revisit, they re-argue, they debate, they research again. They work themselves into a state of high tension because they want so much to be sure. No draft of a document is final without 15 revisions and at least 3 edits and another proofreading. The problem is, in the end, and I have to tell you this, we're still not certain. We're still not certain. I could ask you about anything that you've said you've done with absolute perfection and checked it 20 times, and I'd say, are you sure there's not a single mistake? Most of you are going to go, you're pretty sure. We can't buy certainty, we can't beg it or steal it. A much easier path is just to do our best. To do our best. Trust that we will be right more often than we're not. Okay? We will be much happier when we accept that occasionally we might be less than perfect in the manifestation or actions of our lives. I'm not saying we are not perfect in spirit, because we are. But boy, when we jump into the human bodysuit and start doing stuff, we also start making some astoundingly interesting choices.